Good morning. It is Tuesday, the 11th of August. Things are cooling down nicely, thank you. We are in Romans chapter 9. I wish we could spend a month on Romans 9. It's got such wonderful stuff. I'm going to do 14 through 18 here. Paul writes, "What shall we say then? Is there injustice on God's part? By no means, for he says to Moses, I will have mercy on those whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I have compassion. So it depends not upon man's will or exertion, but upon God's mercy. For the scripture says to Pharaoh, I have raised you up for the very purpose of showing my power in you, so that my name may be proclaimed in all the earth. So then he has mercy upon whomever he wills, and he hardens the heart of whomever he wills." This, friends, presents a crisis for modern thinkers who have learned to think about justice in terms of basic fairness between human beings. If I get 5 apples, you should get 5 apples. My mother used to tell me when I wanted to take a treat to school, well, you have to take enough for all of the kids in the classroom. You can't take enough for yourself. And fairness is a good approximation in most cases of God's justice, but it's only an approximation. The justice of God is when God's will is done. And that doesn't make it into a wax nose, but that means justice happens when God is well served, and injustice happens when human beings act out of accordance with God's will. For 3,000 years, Jews and Christians have understood that God's judgment comes against those who willingly act outside of God's will, those who act with hard hearts. Of course, inevitably the question comes, well, if some sinners are forgiven and other sinners are not forgiven, that's not fair. And the world can make that argument all it wants, but God in the end doesn't have to be fair. God in the end has to be God. If he chooses to be merciful in order to accomplish his will, which remains at depth mysterious to us, if he chooses not to be merciful to others in order to accomplish his will, then that is something with which we have to live. We cannot tie God's hands. We cannot put God in the fairness box and say, God, you have to act in accordance with our standards of fairness, or we're not going to let you out of the box. Or in a variation of that, we cannot say with the secularists, well, if God's going to save some and God's not going to save others, then God is evil and capricious, and we're just not going to believe in God anymore. Well, that too has its cost, which will be made evident over time. The point here is that God makes it all. He makes me, he makes you, he makes everyone else. If he chooses by his mercy to provide a dispensation for some to turn and be forgiven their sins, he is gracious. If others hear that dispensation and reject it, God is still gracious. The fault lies with them. And we must understand that God remains God. When his will is done, either by judgment or by mercy, he is well served and the world is well served, and justice is happening. And that's the only kind of justice in the end that matters. Have a great day.